As we are continuing our S25 FE comparison coverage, and today we got the S20 FE. This is one that I was very curious about. This is the original, FE that Samsung launched, and it's probably still one of the most favorite phones, and you guys are going to see why. I think it has still aged pretty well, the S20 series just in general. But I'm pretty curious to see how the photos and how the speed compares these days. And let's go ahead and get started here. So as you guys can see, the design does look a lot different now. Of course, you have a more modern design on the S25 FE. The S20 really doesn't look that bad. A lot of people say this is probably and I'm talking about the S20 series in general. A lot of people say it's Samsung's most bland and boring design, coming from the S10 and S9. But yeah, I think it still looks okay. This is actually a plastic back. This phone, even though it has a plastic back, it's never felt cheap to me because you have the metal sides on here. So it still gives it that kind of premium feel, and it has a good amount of weight to it. The S25 FE is completely, fully premium glass and metal. And both of these phones are actually IP68 dust and water resistant. One thing that the S20 FE launched with was an SD card. So you do have expandable storage on the S20 FE, so it's a reason why a lot of people have been holding on to the phone so long. And I know a lot of people, just reading the comments, they're actually, finally upgrading this phone because that's how good it was. But yeah, overall design-wise, it still looks great. As you guys can see, let's see. I mean, they're pretty much the same size, with the S25 being a little bit taller here. And then we also have the S20 FE is actually a lot lighter. It's probably due to the smaller battery in here for sure. But yeah, it comes in at 159. So the interesting thing, I was thinking that the S20 FE would be a lot lighter, but it actually comes in at 190 grams. It's the same thing as the S25 FE. So they feel about the same weight, even though you have a kind of a smaller battery on the S20 FE. But that is pretty much it for the hardware difference. So let's check out the displays. We have a 6.5 inch display on the S20 FE, and this is a Super AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus, 1080p 407 for the PPI. The thing that probably will pop out the most is that you do have an 84.8 screen to body ratio on here, so the bezels are a lot thicker on the S20 here, on the top and on the bottom here. The Super AMOLED display still looks pretty good. I don't think the display on the S20 FE looks bad at all, in my opinion. Yes, it is a older display tech, but still, I do like the vivid colors on here. And of course, the S25 FE has a slightly bigger 6.7 inch display. It's dynamic AMOLED, so you have the newer panel. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus as well. This one is 1900 nits peak brightness, so it does a lot better in direct sunlight. And it is also a 1080p panel, 385 for the PPI. And we do have a stronger glass, the Victus Plus, on here. But I'm actually pretty surprised at how good the S20 display still looks. It is a completely flat display as well too. If you guys remember, all the rest of the S20 phones were, they had a curved panel. But yeah, I do really like the display on here. It really doesn't look that different in terms of like the slight color difference. Like the dynamic panels are a bit more color accurate, but yeah, if you really kind of look up close, I mean they look really similar. The S20 still has a pretty good display, but of course, you're getting a slightly better panel here, better color accuracy, brighter, and then also we have overall just a more aesthetically pleasing design with the slimmer bezels here. Let's talk about these specs a little bit more here. The last major update for the S20 FE was the Android 13 on One UI 5.1. We have the Snapdragon 865 chipset on here, 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. On the S25 FE, we have Android 16, One UI 8, 7 years of majorOS updates, and then we have 128 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM on this base model. Of course, the S20 series, I believe this year it just stopped receiving security updates, which I actually heard about the Note 20 series still getting a security patch update, which is crazy. I might do a video on that, but For the most part, it's not getting updates. There is a big difference in app opening speeds and just animations. Okay. Not bad. I mean, the A65 chip is still really, really fast, as we can see here. Even though we have, pretty much double the speed in these benchmarks, I think it's still able to perform pretty well. It's not like it's lagging all over the place or anything like that. If you guys want to see these 3D Mark scores, I believe I have the test on here. So you can see you're getting much better graphic performance here. The S25 wobbles a lot too if you're a table typer. Temper run. So we should see like a bit of a difference. And I think that's where you'll see like an actual kind of a difference is more in these game loadings. Be a bit of a gap there, especially for heavier stuff. So if you do like heavier stuff, you might not notice like opening up Chrome in your social media, but things like video editing, the export times, gaming performance should be a lot better, more consistent, less heating as well. But the A65 chip, I mean, for like the average person, performance is still really good on this phone. Kind of sucks that it didn't get, more updates. I mean, it's still, pretty smooth, guys. Like I said, you kind of notice a little bit more in games, but I mean, it's still very smooth. Of course, the animations have gotten a lot better with One UI 8 versus 5.1. But it's really not that bad, guys. Not big of a crazy gap as you would think. See if the S20 can still play PUBG at Smooth Extreme. And yeah, it's still able to play at Smooth Extreme. They got this new super smooth option here. Let's see. Yeah, this is still pretty smooth. So yeah, so I've never had an issue with the S20 FE when it comes to performance. Unfortunately, the S25 FE is just not really that much better optimized still. So that's why I said usually when they launch with this, because the S20 FE, if you look at like a regular S20, it can play PUBG at 90 frames, but this one should be able to play at 90 frames because it's got the same chip, but they never updated. So that's why I say you're probably stuck with the 60 frames on the S25. But yeah, you're gonna get better, gaming performance for sure. You play games like Genshin and Call of Duty and stuff like that, you'll get better, gaming performance. And also, this phone does a lot better with managing heat if you're doing a lot more intensive stuff. But for the most part, I'm actually pretty surprised at how smooth the S20 FE still is here. Another thing that I do want to mention here, which will be a pretty good upgrade if you do decide to make this upgrade, the Galaxy AI. So if you do like, Galaxy AI, you got the Circle to Search, which you do not have on the, the S20, so you can do that. The updated Gemini is on here as well. And then you also have your Galaxy AI features as well too, so you can, mess around with the stuff like Call Assist and Audio Eraser and the Photo Ambient Wallpaper. Just, a few cool things in here that you can mess around with. But they'll add more AI features and stuff like that, Object Eraser. So yeah, so you have some cool AI stuff here for sure that you can take advantage of. Out the speakers, we're at max volume. We'll start with the S20. So you have decent bass performance on the S20 FE, and overall a pretty decent sound, but you do have a much fuller sound on the S25 FE. You can really hear the 808s a lot better and more clearly on the S25 FE. You can hear the kicks pretty well on the S20, but you can barely hear like the actual 808s. Yeah, it's really faint, like. So I would overall say this is a pretty decent upgrade. It basically sounds, they both sound pretty similar, but you just have a fuller sound coming out of the S25, which is nice. One thing that Samsung has not updated on the FE series is this optical fingerprint scanner. It's not bad by any means. It works. But let's see if this one feels faster. Yeah, no, it still feels, pretty much the same. So unless you move to like an ultrasonic, it's gonna feel exactly the same. All right, so let's talk about the cameras. The S20 does have a 12 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel telephoto, 3x optical, 30x max zoom, and then we have a 12 megapixel ultra wide. We can shoot in 4K 30, and then we have it's 4K 60, and then we have a 32 megapixel selfie that can also shoot in 4K 60. The S25 FE does have a 50 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel telephoto, that is 3x optical. This one also goes up to 30x zoom, and then we can shoot in 8K 30. We have a 12 megapixel selfie on here, and we can shoot in 4K 60. All right, so as far as the battery life goes, I actually think this is a pretty good battery life upgrade. When I was using the S20 FE, the battery was always, it was decent, but it was never anything that was like kind of crazy where you could get kind of like a full day if you were doing like super heavy like gaming, running GPS and stuff like that. As a lighter user, you could pretty easily get through the day with the S20 FE. But with the S25, it just does a much better job with screen on time, and overall it just has a bigger battery, it charges faster, so the battery experience, I think it should be noticeable for most people. You have a 4900 milliamp hour battery, and then on the S20 you have a 4500 milliamp hour battery, and like I said, you have 45 watts and then you have 25 watts on the S20. They both have wireless and reverse wireless charging, and you actually do get 25 watt wireless charging versus the 15 watt on the S20. So I think it's overall a pretty solid battery upgrade. The standby time is a lot better on the S25 as well too. So overall, if you're making this upgrade, it's a pretty good upgrade for the most part. If you do want to buy a new phone, or you just want to stick with the FE series, just in general, yeah, it's a pretty solid upgrade. You are going to be losing the SD card support, but in return you do get updated cameras, updated display, more software updates, a better screen. So it just really depends on, if you think all of the upgrades here are enough. If it's not enough, I would say just use the S20 until you feel like it is enough, right? So be sure to let me know what you guys think.